coming up, starting with our first player, Afshak, Ibrahim Maarouf. I was looking at the the wrong screen. But like I said, a lot of very good recent results for Ibrahim, with a top 32 at the Lille Regional recently, Dortmund again only a few weeks ago, top 8 at that, top 64 at Liverpool last season. So a lot of he's a player on a very strong run of form at the moment. So a lot of momentum, particularly in this current regulation. So it'll be interesting to see how he can maneuver his way around this matchup.
I believe he was on stream actually at the Gdansk Regional Championships, and I was casting over his game there, and it was really nice to see just how much of a development Ibrahim has been able to make over the last year. He's a little bit newer to the video game and a little bit newer to competition, but he's learning very, very quickly and applying all of those things that he knows. He's not a player that you want to be, thinking, hey, maybe I haven't heard of him too much, maybe he hasn't been in the scene for a while, oh, this should be okay. Well, no, definitely someone that you've got to have on your radar.
Yeah, he's definitely the kind of person where if I saw him on my pairings at a regional, I'm now at the point where I go, no, don't want to play this guy. But anyway, on to the team he's using. We have, interestingly, this Terra Electric Power Herb Stalwart Archaladon that I've seen picking up a fair bit recently. So that Terra Electric, a very, very offensive Terra type, not being able to remove the ground weakness that Archaladon has, which is often the thing that people prey on against this, and running that double electric move so you still have that electric type offense after you use your one electro shot with that Power Herb.
It's a nice combination, especially as well combined with the Stalwart ability, making sure that it's not falling foul of Follow Me. But let's take a look at our other player here playing against Ibrahim for Peru, Dorian Quiñonez. I completely got that wrong. I apologise, Dorian. Yeah, there we go. Nearly there, but not quite. Piloting a Rillaboom, Volcarona, Dragonite, Sneasel, Electabuzz, and King Gambit. Now, Matt, this is looking like a fairly well tried and tested team. What's standing out to you right now?
I think on this team, there's not a huge amount that stands out. We've seen a lot of variations of this previously. The one thing I'd say is probably the Assault Vest King Gambit. Often on these teams, you'll see the Assault Vest on the Rillaboom, and King Gambit will be running that Swords Dance set with Kowtow Cleave and Sucker Punch. Instead, this King Gambit opting to go for Low Kick and Iron Head, getting a bit more special bulk with that Assault Vest, which means that with the coaching on Sneasler, because of King Gambit's natural stats, if you can get an attack boost and a defense boost and an Assault Vest on this King Gambit, that's a very, very hard Pokemon to take down.
Very much so. And that combination of those defensive capabilities, the Assault Vest and coaching boosting up both sides, but also with the more defensive Terra Water, it really does stand well into a lot of different teams that are out there right now. Not the Terra type that King Gambit goes for very commonly, but one that really does stand it in good stead. Maybe not so much against a Terra Electric Power Herb Archaladon with Electro Shot and Thunderbolt, but maybe that's just not going to be coming out in this match, and Dorian will be able to capitalise on some of the other choices that he's made in this team.
Yeah, just interesting. We've got the Volcarona as well. I think this was pointed out in a previous match. The coaching on Sneasler not only beneficial for the physical attackers on this team, which there are a lot of, but also on that Volcarona, because if you get a Quiver Dance up with Volcarona and a coaching boost, you've now got a +1 in every single one of your stats. So this team looks like it's built around trying to get these really strong Pokemon with just as many stat multipliers as you can and saying, okay, how are you going to deal with this? And I think in particular the Volcarona could be a real threat in this matchup. With the Assault Vest Ursaluna, the Archaladon, there's a lot of special attackers on this team. So I think maybe you might see Ibrahim leaning into that haze on Dragonite to try and get rid of the coaching boost, the Volcarona Quiver Dances. I think that's going to be a very important piece for Ibrahim.
Well, let's find out how important that's going to be as we get into game one. It's going to be Ibrahim versus Dorian here, leading out the Dragonite and Sneasler for Dorian. Annihilate and Incineroar coming straight out of the gates here for Ibrahim. And this is something that we've seen from Ibrahim quite a lot before, leading out the ability to just go straight on the offensive with a little bit of support from Fake Out.
I like this Annihilate lead here as well into this pairing from Dorian, because Sneasler can't really hit it for very much damage. Obviously, the Annihilate is immune to close combat, and it resists Diaclaw, and you can maybe try and gamble on a Diaclaw getting a status effect, but Sneasler can't really hit it without any risk, and Dragonite's only attacking move that can hit it hits it 5 times. Meaning that if you do that into Annihilate, suddenly its Rage Fist is hitting very, very hard. Yeah.
Well, nothing's going to be hitting into that Annihilate this turn because it is a double protect, just waiting out the fake out from this Incineroar. But that does give the opportunity for Ibrahim to go a little bit on the offensive and defensive with a coaching onto Incineroar and make sure that Sneasler is just that little bit less of a threat.
Yeah, I really like that play from Ibrahim, calling a defensive play from Dorian and saying, okay, if you're going to do something defensive, you're going to switch. If you're going to protect, I'll just use this turn to set up. And Incineroar often is seen as a support Pokemon, but you can forget it has a very, very high attack stat. So with this coaching boost now to its attack, it's dealing a lot of damage. And both of the Pokemon on Dorian's side now, physical attackers with that Intimidate drop, this is a dangerous position because you want to switch those Pokemon out. What do you switch them into that's going to take a close combat from this Annihilate or a +1 Flare Blitz from this Incineroar?
And of course, while you're trying to target down the Incineroar, you're not targeting down the Annihilate, but can still go for coaching boosts. And if you target down the Annihilate, you're boosting up the power, and it's going to be boosting up the Rage Fist while you let that Incineroar go for attacks. Well, Dorian's not going to want it to go for attacks, but unfortunately for Dorian, Ibrahim's defense boost from that Incineroar is going to be enough to easily allow it to hang on here, munching on its Citrus Berry, and going to be able to follow up after this Annihilate goes for a final Gambit into this Dragonite. Easy one-hit knockout there from that Annihilate with its high HP. Final Gambit, of course, doing damage equal to the HP stat that you have remaining at the time. And Incineroar's going to be able to follow this up with a not very effective knockoff, just covering a switch from the Dragonite.
That's an interesting turn there from Ibrahim. I think the final Gambit is a very, very aggressive play, saying, okay, I just want this Dragonite off the field. Clearly perceiving that as the biggest threat on Dorian's side. And it was very interesting there, seeing how little damage that Incineroar took from an Extreme Speed and a super effective close combat from a Sneasler. It hang on, had a bit of a snack, and went, okay, well, I'm going to go on the offensive now. And I like the choice to go for knockoff there, just to cover for, as you said, any potential switches. You're not going to get a one-shot on this Sneasler with a Flare Blitz because of that Focus Sash.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to take the extra recoil damage for no reason.
And now the Dragonite coming in puts Ibrahim in a really nice situation where you can go for the Extreme Speed onto the Sneasler, risk knocking. Dorian has to deal with the risk of that being knocked out straight away from that HP range. But you've got a +1 Incineroar, it's got Flare Blitz, that King Gambit's a part Steel type, and that's easily going to be able to pick up the knockoff, the KO there. And of course, because of the defense boost and because of Incineroar's natural dark typing, the King Gambit's going to struggle to do anything in to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, we do see the Volcarona coming in here, a good switch with the Flame Body ability now. Dorian able to fish for maybe a burn on any hits that go into that Volcarona, saying, okay, I think you're going to try and pick me off with E-Speed. I'm going to bring in my Volcarona. If Flame Body activates, now suddenly I'm in a great position. Your multi-scale's gone, your Dragonite's burned. And we do see the Terror coming out from King Gambit, trying to survive what is going to be a very, very large Flare Blitz. Lose me the Flame Body!
It comes out, the Dragonite is now burnt. Incineroar does get the opportunity to go for a Flare Blitz. That Terra Water paying absolute dividends, turning a super effective move into a not very effective move. It's able to reply with a low kick. That low kick, middling base power going into Incineroar, but it is super effective. And just look at the way that that coaching has been able to allow Ibrahim's Incineroar to be able to hang on turn after turn after turn.
Yeah, the coaching has given the Incineroar a lot of mileage, but at the same time, with the coaching boost, it's not been able to do what Incineroar often likes to do, which is pivoting around. You maybe on that Volcarona switch, and if you get a parting shot on your Volcarona, suddenly that's a lot less threatening. Maybe you can get something in the back that can now exert offensive pressure, but instead this Incin has been staying in, and it's gotten some good damage down the Sneasler, but not enough to KO it. The King Gambit, it forced the Terror, but now it's in a horrible spot where you've got a burned Dragonite. Volcarona can KO the Incineroar before it's going to do any more damage, and Dragonite's not now really doing any damage in return because of that burn. So I think that was a really, really excellent turn from Dorian, obviously getting a little bit fortunate with that burn, but a 30% chance, you can't really complain too much about that.
You can't complain about being able to finally knock out this Incineroar before it goes for yet another attack with a Sucker Punch coming out. And of course, taking advantage here, Dorian, of the burn from the Dragonite. Maybe this would have been something slightly different if the Dragonite hadn't been burned on the switch in, but because it had, Volcarona gets an opportunity to go for a pretty safe Quiver Dance. And you can see the effect of that scale shot there going into the King Gambit. The burn doing so much work here, just kind of tickling the King Gambit. And King Gambit's like sitting there like, yeah, come at me. I'm absolutely happy to be able to take this attack in this situation. And from a really strong situation from Ibrahim in the early game, Dorian has really turned the tables.
Yeah, it's been a very, very good comeback from Dorian, switching the momentum up. And we see what we were saying earlier about just how good King Gambit's stats are. With that Assault Vest, with its naturally high defense and HP, it's so difficult to get rid of. It's still over half health, having taken a +1 Flare Blitz from Incineroar, and albeit a burn scale shot, but still a scale shot from a Dragonite. So this King Gambit now in a very strong position. We see this Assault Vest Ursaluna coming in, which is good into this Volcarona, because obviously Volcarona being a special attacker, you want to be able to take those hits better, but it also means this Ursaluna cannot protect, and it is forced to go for an attack, which leaves it vulnerable to Sucker Punch as well.
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing, is like how you target in this situation while being able to take those big attacks, like a Heat Wave on that Volcarona, doing pretty decent damage into both the Dragonite and this Assault Vest Ursaluna. Here's a scale shot going into the King Gambit. Hit four times last time, but they're going to be hitting 5 times this time, dropping the defensive Dragonite and also increasing its speed a little bit further. Maybe getting Dragonite to a point where it can haze in front of this Volcarona and be able to get it off before it attacks yet again. Blood Moon from the Ursaluna into that King Gambit is enough to finally pick up the knockout here. Ibrahim really focusing that down, and Volcarona just having a little bit of recovery, just putting itself into a slightly better spot. But these two Pokemon on Ibrahim's side have got a lot of work to do still.
There's a lot of work to do, especially with a bird Dragonite. As you said, there's the threat of haze from this Dragonite, but you also maybe want to try and hit the Sneasler with Dragonite to stop it from getting a big hit down on Ursaluna.
Right.
One thing that's very important to note, though, is that Ibrahim does still have his Terastallization. It looks like we're going to see it coming out here. With the Poison Terastallization, neither of Sneasler's moves are doing a very large amount of damage to the very physically bulky Ursaluna. So this maybe could be, as you said, the Dragonite goes for a haze. Ursaluna then just takes the hits, because Volcarona loses its stat boosts. Now that Assault Vest means it's taking hits a lot better, and it resists the Sneasler's attacks. And now there's potentially a big Hyper Voice coming out to KO the Sneasler and get some damage down to Volcarona. So Ibrahim positioning well and saving his Terra for the endgame may pay off here, depending on how much it can take in damage from these two Pokemon.
I'm just going to say it, Matt. Dive Bomb. That could be one of the big considerations here for Ibrahim. Do you want to actually allow yourself to fall foul of some sort of status here, or are you content to play the percentages and just go, as we're seeing here, with this Terra Poison onto the Blood Moon Ursaluna? Sneasler instead going for a Protect and not just wanting to play that game whatsoever, just waiting for the Volcarona to do a little bit more damage, but it is a scale shot coming out from that Dragonite. We see before that the Blood Moon Ursaluna will be able to take a Heat Wave. This Dragonite probably will be able to too, but with only 4 hits, I'm not sure whether the Hyper Voice is going to put that Volcarona in range.
Well, Dorian saying, I don't actually want to bother trying to hit Heat Wave. I'm going to go for the guaranteed damage with Terra Blast here. Dragonite now potentially in range of a couple of ticks of that burn damage as well. And High Voice, as you said, with all of those boosts on the Volcarona, not enough to pick up. The leftovers getting a little bit more recovery as well, just taking it that little bit further away from that KO range. Dragonite now, it will be able to take one more tick of burn, but it's not in a great spot here. You do potentially have an extreme speed into Sneasler, or you've got the threat of Hyper Voice from Ursaluna. Maybe you can go for another Scale Shot into the Volcarona as well to KO that. But it's going to be tricky, and I think it is. A lot of this is going to come down to what the last Pokemon for Dorian is.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. Does Ibrahim have enough sort of gas in the tank after going for the more defensive haze play? If the Volcarona does then go for a Heat Wave, knock out the Dragonite, if it does miss on the Dragonite, or maybe there was a Terra Blast on the Volcarona just to make sure, again, guaranteed damage, as you pointed out there, into the Dragonite slot, maybe there's enough there for Ibrahim to make it all the way. But no, it's going to be a double Protect on Dorian's side.
We do see the double protect, obviously scared of a scale shot or an extreme speed coming out from Ibrahim. And even though the double protect does go off, the haze goes off as well. Now this heat wave from Volcarona is enough to pick up the Dragonite. Ursaluna hanging on with about a third of its health left. It is going to be able to pick up the KO on this Volcarona now that it does not have those Quiver Dance boosts. But depending on what's in the back, it might not.
There's nothing in the back. I just realised, I was just looking, there's nothing in the back. The Dragonite went down to the final Gambit, the King Gambit went down.
Of course it did, yes.
The Volcarona's now gone down to the Heat Wave. Here we've got the Sneasler versus Ursaluna.
You're right, it's Fireclaw!
No, close combat coming out here. It's enough!
It's enough!
This Ursaluna is going down. Critical hit! It's definitely the right word to be using in this situation here, Matt, because that is a big close combat. Dorian has got to be feeling so happy in that situation, and of course, let's be clear here. Ursaluna is known for its physical defensive capabilities, and with the poison typing, it was resisting that close combat. I don't know about you, Matt. I think it needed it. I think it needed that critical.
I really think that's why I thought it was Direclaw. I thought it was Direclaw because you're not going to KO with the close combat there. So if you can get a sleep or maybe a full paralysis, that then gives you your out, which is more likely than getting a crit. But we'll never know. We will never know because the close combat gets the critical hit. It may have mattered. It's hard to tell. Depends on how the Pokemon are trained on either side, obviously. But with Assault Vest Ursaluna, you're often investing a lot in its bulk. You're often training it to be very, very bulky. And so that critical hit may have mattered. Yeah,
I mean, look at how much damage the Heat Wave did at +1 from the Volcarona. Maybe that was a defensively trained Volcarona into an also defensively trained Ursaluna, but it took those Heat Waves really, really well.
And that's on its weaker defensive stat.
Yeah. Is it weaker with the Assault Vest? I don't know. Well, anyway,
maybe.
Let's move on from there. Matt, what are you thinking coming from game one? That was tight. An absolute nail-biter. What are you thinking for both of these players' adjustments for game two?
I think the lead was very good from Ibrahim, but I think maybe you might want to play to conserve the Annihilate for a little bit longer, I think would be my takeaway from that, because the Pokemon that Dorian brought there, the Sneasler and Dragonite in particular, as we mentioned, with the Intimidate especially, can't really hit into it without just giving it free Rage Fist stacks. And it's also very, very strong into the King Gambit that we saw that was doing so much damage from Dorian's end and taking so long to get rid of. So I would say maybe not going for the trade on the Annihilate early on, maybe trying to keep that around for later on in the game where it can still put on pressure, like having a big physical attacker into that Volcarona, for example. Volcarona then can't freely click Heat Wave because if it gives the Annihilate more Rage Fist boosts, then
making that Annihilate a little bit grumpy. Well, we've got the same leads coming out in game two as we had in game one, but this time we're not going to see the trade here, Matt. I think you'll be happy to see instead just the switch up here of the Annihilate into the Whimsicott, and again Ibrahim trying to take advantage of a little bit more of a defensive play from Dorian. Protect from the Sneasler, fake out into the Sneasler from the Incineroar, but this Dragonite didn't protect this turn, and it's not having any of it. No coaching boost this time. Dragonite just going for the haze.
Getting rid of any potential coaching boosts, and again saying to Ibrahim, I don't want you to do the same thing you did on turn 1 last game, but also, and I think maybe more importantly, it gets rid of the Intimidate drops on the Sneasler and the Dragonite. So now this Incineroar is in threat range of that close combat. Now obviously you have the Annihilate at the back that can switch in on attacks from either of these two pretty comfortably, and you've got the Whimsicott to maybe set Tailwind as well. Do you want to focus that down? But getting rid of those Intimidate boosts gives so many more options for Dorian.
And one of those options is going to be Extreme Speed onto the Dragonite, just trying to go first, stop an Encore from the Whimsicott, but Ibrahim correctly targeting down that Sneasler and going for the Encore, encoring it into Protect, making sure that it's not going on the offensive. No one-hit KOs this turn, and of course a knockoff, a really big knockoff there actually onto the Dragonite, because that takes away the loaded dice and it stops the guarantee of Scale Shot doing at least 4 hits.
Yeah, that's a very, very good turn for Ibrahim. Given the very defensive nature of Dorian's turn 1 last game, I think bringing the Whimsicott in with Encore there to punish double protect was very, very smart. And also going for the Encore into the Sneasler instead of the Dragonite, which can Extreme Speed to get around a potential Encore.
Yeah, it's a big play to be able to make to keep the Sneasler in there, but it's not going to stay in. Again, Volcarona instead coming out for the Sneasler.
And King Gambit, scary.
King Gambit. Yeah, there we go. Moonblast doesn't get the special attack drop. It doesn't activate King Gambit's Defiant ability. A Flare Blitz going into the Volcarona does a good amount of damage. The leftovers coming out from this Volcarona probably doesn't take it out of range of being knocked out from another Flare Blitz, regardless of if it goes for the Terror this turn or not.
I do like how Dorian is playing around with these switch-ins. We saw in the last game the Volcarona on the extreme speed to get the burn there, and this time with King Gambit, there's the option of maybe parting shot off of the Dragonite that it could punish, or again the special attack drop on Moonblast that it could switch in on. Not getting any this time, but again, I like that he's putting himself in these positions to have those chances to get something that might just snowball the game away. Because a +2 boost on King Gambit would be so difficult for Ibrahim to get around in this situation.
Yeah, especially with a Terra Water on the King Gambit, you can play that sort of defensive game. Knock out the Whimsicott this turn, and then you don't have to worry about Encore. You can go for your Sucker Punches. If that Incineroar did go for a switch out, it comes back in again, well, that's another boost to your attack. But this turn, it's going to be Incineroar going for the Terra and getting into its Grass typing. A really dangerous play in front of a Fire-type Volcarona, but really trying to capitalise on a Tailwind coming out from the Whimsicott. And Volcarona sees that coming, going for a Protect, making sure that it's getting another turn of Leftovers recovery, as Knockoff goes into the King Gambit. Incineroar getting a critical hit, but most importantly, knocking off the Assault Vest from the King Gambit, allowing Ibrahim to do a little bit more damage. And of course, Low Kick now not super effective anymore. Ibrahim doing a really good job of predicting what Dorian's going for.
Yeah, that was a good turn from Dorian, calling that they probably wouldn't be eating a Flare Blitz on that King Gambit, given that they went for the Terastallization last time. So leaving that on the field, leaving the Terastallization open. I think Ibrahim's Terastallization on the Incineroar there is a little bit dangerous, because now you have two Grass types in front of that Volcarona. And obviously with the Protect on that previous turn, Whimsicott now is threatening it with Encore. But if you Encore that slot and it switches, that's now a free switch on a turn where the Whimsicott's not doing anything, and this King Gambit is still so threatening.
Well, the Incineroar is going to switch out and not want to take any Heat Waves or any other damaging moves for that matter. Instead, Annihilate wanting to come in and maybe try to charge up its Rage Fist ability there, as the Volcarona also switches out. So yeah, Dorian, I think, learned his lesson from the previous turns, not wanting to get locked into Encore. And it does give this King Gambit the opportunity to go for its Terror a little bit more defensively, both being able to not take as much damage from the Flare Blitz, but also from the Annihilate coming in with its fighting type moves as well.
Ironhead coming out there is just going to clear out that Whimsicott, and I think that's a sensible choice there, because with the Terra Water, Incineroar's not really threatening the King Gambit very much. Another thing to note is that if you go for that Terra Water on King Gambit, you remove your immunity to Prankster moves from Whimsicott. So potentially if you'd gone for a Kowtow Cleave into Incineroar, for example, Whimsicott would have then been able to Encore you into that, and that's something that Ibrahim would have been able to play around. So getting rid of the Whimsicott there means no more Encore shenanigans, no more Tailwinds after this one is gone. I think that's a very sensible play, getting rid of the support piece, just to stop it from being really annoying, basically.
Yeah, really quite challenging to be able to deal with, and Whimsicott does like that supportive situation on a team, just being able to, well, annoy their opponents, to just make the game more difficult to play. But now, as it happens, this Annihilate coming in with its ability to go for a coaching as well. That Dragonite's really going to like that ability to cancel out the defense drops from the Scale Shot. Here it is, coaching coming out into the Annihilate, boosting up the attack and defense of the Dragonite. Now, these Dragonite could be speed tying here, but it is Ibrahim's that's coming in first. Critical hit bypassing the multi-scale ability on Dorian's, and it only taking 2 Scale Shots to be able to take the knockout on the Dragonite on Dorian's side.
No risk of speed tie there, because there is still the Tailwind up on Ibrahim's side, so that one I think was a call on whether or not you go for a Protect on Dragonite from Dorian. But with the coaching, I don't think you necessarily mind if Dorian makes the defensive play there, because then next turn you just get another coaching boost. And
Right.
now this is a much stronger position, I think, for Ibrahim. The Dragonite having that +1 boost to its attack and its defense against King Gambit, obviously a strong physical attacker, but this Volcarona is going to go down now to a scale shot. It doesn't have the terrestrialization to make itself immune. So this is a dangerous position for the Volcarona. The speed boost also on the Dragonite, very important for when this Tailwind expires.
Well, this Dragonite is at neutral defense, so it's possible that this King Gambit with a Sucker Punch would be able to pick up a knockout, but I think you'd be fishing for another critical hit in this situation. It looks like Ibrahim has navigated themselves to a pretty good spot here. And I guess the question is, do you need to knock out the Volcarona, or do you just go for the safe scale shot into the King Gambit? We know that it was carrying the Assault Vest, and therefore it can't protect itself like this Volcarona is going for right now. And that does give the opportunity for you to make sure that you're capitalizing on the damage that you're doing this turn. But Ibrahim, going into the Volcarona, going into that Protect, not doing any damage this turn, but what is doing damage is that final Gambit into the King Gambit and knocking out both the Annihilate and the King Gambit there. What I really like about this is it does give a free switch in for Ibrahim to bring in their fake out Pokemon of Incineroar that's in the back without risk of activating a Defiant ability.
Yeah, see, this time I really like that trade from Ibrahim, because as you said, it brings the Incineroar in for free, and now we're in an endgame situation with that Dragonite being set up. And Dragonite is much more scary when it's set up than an Incineroar is, because it can boost its own speed. It's now faster than both the Sneasler and the Volcarona. And as you said, you reposition, like you get rid of the King Gambit, which is a threat because it's the only priority left on Dorian's team at that point. And also the Defiant boost with Incineroar coming in no longer exists to scare it away. So now we have a situation where you've got Fake Out on the field, you've got your speedy Dragonite into two Pokemon that are going to fate to anything that Dragonite is going to hit them with.
And you've got this question mark as to whether or not Volcarona is going to be able to go for a double Protect. Sneasler definitely wants to go for a Protect this turn because it doesn't want to fall foul of a Fake Out here. Fake Out, though, going into the Volcarona. Now that the Incineroar is a Grass type, it could have burnt, but it does not. Scale Shot going into the Volcarona does land its mark and is able to provide a knockout. Now, Scale Shot doesn't provide any contact, so there's no chance of a Flame Body activation there. And now Dragonite gets yet another speed boost. It's definitely going to be outspeeding this Sneasler. And Ibrahim really does want to be locking into those accurate moves to be able to clean up this game.
Precisely. I think the kind of the quote-unquote obvious play there is just to click the move that kills with the Pokemon that's faster with this Dragonite clicking Scale Shot. But obviously there's that 10% chance that it misses. Ibrahim instead making the correct play, very sensibly going for the extreme speed, knowing that if you then KO the Dragonite, the Incineroar will be able to pick up the KO of the Sneasler, and if you go after the Incineroar, then the Dragonite can just extreme speed the Sneasler again. So very, very well played endgame from Ibrahim, and I think this is kind of what I was saying after the first game, where it's keeping that Annihilate around and then making the trade at the right time. And I enjoy that Incineroar took a bit of a pause at the end of that game. It's like, that was a tiring game of Pokemon.
Oh.
We just finished. I need to sit down and have a snack.
Yeah, definitely.
Everyone's gone. He's like, nah, it's snack time. Just wait a sec.
Yeah. Do you know what? I really relate to you, Incineroar, because that was one of those games. It's getting close to about 6 o'clock in the UK here, and I'm thinking about taking a snack myself. But we've got more Pokemon to play, and Matt, we're going to a game 3 here in the top 16 here at the Victory Road World Cup, Germany versus Peru. Matt, game 3. What are you thinking?
It's interesting. I think, again, that lead of Incineroar Annihilate has been really, really troublesome for Dorian. So I guess there's a question now of, do you maybe want to lead the King Gambit into that? Do you feel like taking that risk? Because it leads to so many calls, because the Annihilate does cover the King Gambit nicely.
Yeah.
But if it goes for that Water Terrestrialization, it's not so clear-cut, because you could Final Gambit it to get rid of it, but if you get Sucker Punched on that Final Gambit, that Final Gambit's not going to then KO the King Gambit. So do you bring the King Gambit and just try and scare Ibrahim into making a play that doesn't quite work out? Or do you again play it safe, keep that King Gambit in the back end? I think a lot of this is going to come down to leads, because whether or not Ibrahim can conserve that Annihilate depends on whether or not he needs to use it early game.
I think that's the nice thing about leading such a fast Annihilate with the ability to focus Sash, to not get KO'd. The ability for coaching the yes, but it is a bit speedier. It's got a lot of HP investment. I know exactly what I was going for, but it wasn't what I said. So anyway, let's get into game 3. We're going to wipe all of that, and it's going to be a little bit of a switch up here. Dragonite Whimsicott versus Electabuzz and Volcarona.
Very different leads from both players this time round, which is interesting. I think, ironically, the Incineroar and Ilex lead would have actually been quite strong into this. So Dorian saying, okay, I think that you are going to change something up here, and so I'm going to change up accordingly. And I think this Volcarona is in a really, really strong spot, especially with the redirection support from the Electabuzz. It's not going to take too much damage from a Scale Shot from this Dragonite. Whimsicott no longer can go for any Encore shenanigans into the Volcarona, so it does give Volcarona the chance to set up in front of what's normally a very, very annoying Pokemon.
Well, the other key aspect here is that because there's no Terra already used, Dorian does have the opportunity to go for a Terra Fairy and just wipe out all of the damage. There we go. Poke it into existence. Here it is, the Volcarona with the lovely heart on its head. Being a Terra Fairy type now, there's less of a need for the Electabuzz to go for a Follow Me, and that's what it's doing. It's just going a little bit on the offensive here. Quiver Dance coming out from the Volcarona and going to be boosting up the special attack, special defense, and speed, but of course it's now at neutral stages of speed, or special attack in fact, because of the Moonblast dropping the special attack of that Volcarona. Now a Taunt going into the Dragonite, stopping any Haze shenanigans, and Electabuzz dashing out of the way of a Scale Shot.
Yeah, that's a very good turn, I think, from Dorian. The Taunt there, stopping the Haze on Dragonite, is a very smart move. The problem is that special attack drop means this Volcarona is now not doing a huge amount of damage, and this Dragonite does still have its multi-scale up. Dragonite can't now hit Volcarona without risking a Flame Body, but also Electabuzz no longer has a defensive terror it can use. It can redirect attacks. I wonder if maybe Dorian just goes for more setup here without the Haze on the table from Ibrahim's side.
Right, and if it does that, then maybe the Whimsicott has an opportunity to go for an Encore into the Volcarona slot and just make it carry on Quiver Dancing and eventually sort of be able to deal with that with Final Gambit in the back, if you can knock out this Electabuzz in the meantime. But then, of course, there is also the opportunity for the Fake Tears if you're able to go for the damage onto the Electabuzz and eventually knock that out as well. As it stands, no Quiver Dances, just a Heat Wave, no Encores either coming out from the Whimsicott. In fact, just a little bit of more damage with a Moonblast. If Whimsicott, usually the supportive Pokemon on the team, opting for a completely different scenario here, but it is the Electabuzz also going on the offensive with a Thunderbolt. Good damage into the Dragonite, but it does get to reply with a Scale Shot.
That's a really good call from Dorian there, because obviously the threat of Encore is on the field from the Whimsicott, and if Electabuzz clicks Follow Me, that's a wasted turn from Ibrahim if he goes for Encore, because the Electabuzz probably just wants to keep clicking Follow Me regardless. But instead he goes, okay, I am going to call that you're not going to Encore me, so I'm just going to attack with the Electabuzz. There's nothing really threatening the Volcarona, and he's rewarded with a lot of damage. There was another special attack drop from the Whimsicott onto that Electabuzz, but Electabuzz goes, I choose not to actually see that. I'm just going to critical hit anyway.
Yeah, that's and it's a big amount of damage to be able to do to that Dragonite, but you don't necessarily need it. I mean, most importantly, the Terra Fairy Terra Blast onto the Volcarona is going to be able to put the Dragonite under a lot of pressure here, and it allows Dorian to play a game where you can knock out the Pokemon that you really want to. You can keep going for spread Heat Waves, you can keep going for lots of bits and pieces of damage, and maybe get into a situation where a Sneasler in the back might be able to put on a lot more pressure and take an endgame.
Yeah, as you said, the Dragonite not able to protect there meant that it was a bit of free reign for Volcarona to go for whatever it wants to, and again, we don't see the Follow Me coming out from Dorian, saying, okay, I don't really mind whatever it is you're doing on the other side of the field, I just want my Follow Me user to stay alive. And so we do see that Terra Fairy Terra Blast coming out. This is this +1 or neutral? It's +1, right? Because it Quiver Danced again? Oh, neutral. It was one Quiver Dance, yeah. Yeah, that damage looks neutral, yeah. But still good damage on the Incineroar here. And the Electabuzz again staying alive to protect this Volcarona for a little bit longer.
But the difficulty here for Dorian is that with a fake out and Moonblast, bit of pressure, you might be able to knock out the Electabuzz here. If you're able to do that, and the Volcarona just plays a little bit defensive, then you lose the ability to go for a follow me. And then the Volcarona can get locked into a defensive play. So even though the Incineroar's coming in, it's got an active fake out on the board, you probably don't want to play on the defensive with the Volcarona just in case.
Yeah, and we do see that from Dorian, as you said, keeping the Volcarona safe with that follow me, but not risking going for a defensive move there in case, as you said, the Electabuzz does get knocked out and the Encore comes into play. So a smart play from Dorian, playing around a bit of a trap that Ibrahim was trying to set there, and there's still this big offensive pressure from the Volcarona. And I think at +1 speed, there's a good chance it's still faster than Incineroar, even with the Tailwind up. So Whimsicott now suddenly under a lot of pressure.
Especially with what could come in from the back from Dorian here. And I suppose the question that these trainers have got to ask themselves is like, what's my end game? What am I really trying to play towards? Do I want to leave the Whimsicott on the field with the Rillaboom coming in, especially target down the Incineroar with a combination of Fake Out and Terra Blast, or do you want to just go straight on the offensive and just go straight for the high horsepower into the Incineroar, leave the Whimsicott just launching out some pretty average damaging Moonblasts, and try to play this game where you've got Whimsicott in the end game, but it just doesn't have the damage to compete with the Pokemon that Dorian has in the end game.
Yeah, the other option I think is just trying to clear as many Pokemon off the field as possible if you're Dorian now, because with Incineroar being able to pivot, we see the Rillaboom here from Dorian. Doesn't want to start dealing with too many Intimidates. Maybe you do just go for that very, very aggressive play. You do also have the option of Fake Out, and it's worth noting Whimsicott can't protect here. It does not have that option, so a Grassy Glide could always pick that up as well. So I think Dorian in the driver's seat, even though the Tailwind is up at the moment. We see the Fake Out coming out into the Incineroar. Encore comes out. Very good call from Ibrahim there. I like that.
Yeah, just taking advantage of the fact that the Fake Out will always go before Whimsicott's Encore, and taking advantage of that. Well, it's a critical hit on the Whimsicott with a Heat Wave for good measure, and it's not going to be staying on the field. Of course, Incineroar cannot act, but it's not the end of the game, Incineroar. You can't munch on that citrus berry just yet.
It's not snack time yet. It's not snack time.
It's not snack time. There's still Pokemon to be played. But not just that, we're also having a situation where Dorian is getting a lot of recovery on the Volcarona with its combination of leftovers and the grassy terrain, but also waiting out these Tailwind turns, and I think that could be a really crucial timing aspect that Dorian's playing for and Ibrahim's got to be worried about.
Yeah, the Dragonite coming in here as well is threatening a haze on this Volcarona. I guess at this point, do you really mind if you're Dorian if these boosts get hazed away? Because you don't have your special attack boost. Volcarona is naturally faster than everything we've seen on Ibrahim's team. So the Rillaboom here is forced to switch as well because it's locked into that Fake Out, which was, again, a very, very good move from Ibrahim. We see some very, very smart play from him because even though that Whimsicott seemingly was a bit shut down by the Electabuzz, he still managed to get so much value out of it just being on the field. Like, the fact that the Whimsicott was there meant that he had to... sorry, what am I saying? That Dorian had to protect his Electabuzz really hard, which was something that Ibrahim managed to play very well around. Yeah. And now we're in a situation where this Rillaboom, again, kind of has to switch out, and we do see that switch coming out, and we are going to see the final Mon here from Dorian, and it is that King Gambit that's done him so well so far in this set.
King Gambit saying, I'm just going to take my place on the field, I can't get encored, and you just have a break in the back, Rillaboom, come back in a little bit later on with your Fake Out, and give us a little bit of a hand in our endgame. Dragonite going for its Terra Steel, and trying to play a little bit more defensively into a Terra Fairy, Terra Blast from the Volcarona, but Volcarona not falling for it whatsoever, instead trying to get that little bit of HP recovery back. Dragonite going for the Scale Shot, getting caught with the King Gambit, and I think Ibrahim taking advantage of the fact that Rillaboom really has to switch. That's pretty telegraphed. 5 hits coming out from the Scale Shot, doing pretty good damage, and I wouldn't be surprised if a follow-up Flare Blitz was enough to pick up a one-hit knockout here.
Well, we're about to find out, or are we? We're not about to find out.
We're not.
That goes into the Volcarona's Protect, and I believe that should be the end of Tailwind from Ibrahim's side. So Dragonite does get that speed boost, and now we'll have to see who's faster between the Volcarona and the Dragonite, but it looks like the Dragonite did get at that grassy terrain recovery first, which is really important information. But that was with the tailwind, so that wasn't, yeah.
With a tailwind, yeah. So it could still be this Volcarona that's fast, and of course it can just lock itself into Heatwave in this situation. Dragonite's probably going to go down to that, and that does give a little bit of telegraph onto the way that Dragonite's playing. Maybe it has to go for the extreme speed to just get that last little knocking of damage or play a little bit on the defensive. I think for me, the question is does the King Gambit want to play defensively against a potential Flare Blitz from the Incineroar, or does Dorian want to switch that out into the Rillaboom? I try to maybe have the Incineroar take a little bit of recoil, soften it up for the Volcarona to be able to deal with, and be able to launch himself into a position where Volcarona is able to just Heat Wave for the rest of the game.
I think it's worth noting as well, it's kind of gone under the radar here, but Volcarona took some chip damage earlier, and with leftovers and the grassy terrain recovery, it's back at full health. So, despite all of the work that Ibrahim's been doing to try and keep it under control, it's still fully healthy. We do see that Flare Blitz come out into King Gambit. It's not enough to pick up the KO.
Not enough.
Does it get a burn?
No, that's a big survival. And the low kick. No Terra option coming out from this Incineroar this turn. It was spent on the Dragonite, and now the low kick, proving why it was there in the first place. Dorian getting that key knockout onto the Incineroar. And with the Dragonite being a Terra Steel, that's a big piece of the defensive puzzle taken out for Ibrahim. Dorian putting themselves in a nice spot, but this Annihilate's coming back in, and well, when there's an Annihilate, there's a potential final Gambit, but also you've got to start targeting it down, and that's going to boost up the power of the Rage Fist.
Yeah, I don't know if you can afford to go for Final Gambit here. I guess if you go for a double protect on the Dragonite and can get rid of the Volcarona this turn, Dragonite might be able to eke something out against King Gambit and Rillaboom, but it's not likely, because you'd need a double protect, then there'd be fake out pressure next turn from the Rillaboom, so you'd need another protect. I don't think you can afford to go for the Final Gambit trade here. But the counterpoint to that is, if you don't get the double protect, Dragonite is likely going to faint anyway.
Yeah, and it's like maybe you just have to. Or if your Dragonite has, gotten the speed boost it needs, maybe you can go for a Haze and try to get that Annihilate a little bit faster than the Annihilate this turn. But let's see, as a Sucker Punch fails into the Dragonite goes for a Haze, but is not successful because that Volcarona is outspeeding it. It's able to get the Heat Wave off. It's powering up the Annihilate just that little bit. Close combat into the King Gambit is, well, very easily enough to pick up the KO here. But this Annihilate, well, it's slower than the Volcarona. It's not got its ability to go for a Terra. The Terra Fairy Terra Blast from Volcarona, even though its neutral stages of special attack is looming in front of it, and of course Rillaboom's coming up to back up its moth-like friend here. A Woodhammer and a Terra Blast coming out from the Volcarona and the Rillaboom would probably be enough to pick up the KO here.
Glide almost picks it up by itself.
Terra Blast coming out here, and yeah, looking at that coming out, the Annihilate is no longer able to attack this turn. It is going down. A 2-1 victory for Dorian and securing another win for Peru in this match